Good evening. I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Board of Education. The board began closed session this evening at 5:40 for the purpose of 4 items: employment of employee, collective negotiations, actual potential litigation, and approval of September 28, 2010 and October 12, 2010 closed session minutes. Please note that we only addressed the September 28th minutes. The October 12th meeting minutes will be carried forward to another meeting. Mrs. Walsh, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Carlquist is absent. Mr. Collins?
Here.
Ms. Conroy? Here. Mrs. Davy? Mrs. Droney?
Here.
Ms. Hirsch?
Here.
Mrs. Ostajic?
Here. 6 board members present, 1 absent. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Our first item on our agenda is public comment. Are there any? Okay, so we have no individuals signed up for public comment. We will move forward on our agenda. Our next item is Superintendent's communication. We will start with the preliminary tax levy. Dr. Krizik?
As you know, every year Ms. Masterton gives you a preliminary tax levy presentation, and then the following month she presents to you the opportunity for you to approve the tentative tax levy. So I'm not going to say very much because the last time I introduced Pat and laid out some things about the tax levy presentation, I took her first slide away. So I'm not going to do this. But, you know, this is probably one of the most critical conversations that you as a board have as it relates to revenue for ensuing years, since we are a district that relies heavily on local property taxes. Ms. Masterton.
Thank you, Dr. Krizik. I want to make sure this is on. Oh, it is. Okay. Let's first go over the timeline, which we do with our budget process and we do with our levy process tonight. We hope that the board will approve our tentative levy. And we have already today posted information about the tentative levy on our finance page on the internet. Because our proposed levy is more than 5% increase from the prior year, we will be putting out a publication of truth and taxation notice. You have to do that not more than 14 days nor less than 7 days before the hearing. We would have done it anyway. However, last year we had less than 5% and we still did it. So it's just a good practice to have. And then our levy hearing is proposed to be on November 16th, 2010. The levy is approved. We will need to take that to both DuPage and Cook County before 12/25/2010 to file those levies. Around 4/1/11, the counties notified the district of the extension amount, the amount that we expect to receive. And at our April board meeting, we will present you with that actual extension. In June, we received the first half of the taxes that were levied in November and December. That is in fiscal year 2010-11, and then the second half comes in September of 2011. That's booked in fiscal year 2011-12. Just to give you some information and some glossary of terms, I know most of you know this, but it's always good to review it again. The levy is the amount of taxes the district requests the county clerk to levy or charge property owners. Our tax rate is a formula. It's the extension amount divided by the equalized assessed valuation times 100. So in 2009, our extension was $88,162,937. Divide that by our 2009 EAV, which was $2,652,518,847 times 100, and you get our tax rate, which was $3.32. New growth is those properties that are added to the tax rolls during the tax year. New growth EAV is exempt from tax caps. And then the aggregate levy is the total annual levy of the district minus the debt service levy, the annual corporate property tax levy, plus any special purpose levies. Debt service levy is the amount needed to meet annual principal and interest payments on bonds and notes. Please note that that is the one levy that is part of the levy that is not capped. Okay? EAV is the value of all properties within the taxing district as determined by the township assessor. And DuPage County properties are assessed at 33.33% of their market value. In Cook, residential properties are 16.67% of their market value. The extension is the amount of taxes billed to the property owners by the county clerk in the previous year. So there is a difference between the levy, which is the amount we ask for, and the extension, which is the amount we get. Our assumptions for 2010 are the CPI, which we already know is for 2009 was 2.7%, and that's what we'll be using for our tax levy. The York's assessor has provided us with new growth information. We're expected to receive in new growth $17,287,310. We extrapolate that into Addison Township and Cook County and expect and are projecting $22 million in new growth altogether. We also have an equalization factor in York Township of a negative 6.8%. This means that property values have dropped by 6.8% in York Township. Based on this data, we're estimating our 2010 equalized assessed valuation altogether to drop by 5.68%. The proposed levy is the amount we propose to submit, which is inflated, to ensure that no allowable tax dollars are lost. We're inflating our estimated levy by 2% this year. What's important to understand is that the loss of tax revenue that can be incurred when we do not inflate for possible additional new growth is not for 1 year, but is not ever recovered, and therefore compounded every single year thereafter. So if we under-levy 1 year, each year after we receive only the CPI percentage times that amount and then the new growth. Estimated extension is the amount we conservatively expect to see extended. And here's our CPI history, which is in a really kind of an interesting graph. Our average over the last 10 years is 2.5%. Our high point was in 2008 when we had a 4.1% EA CPI, and last year it was 0.1%. So you see that high and then this huge drop down to 0.1%. Now we're back up to 2.7%. But if you notice, there's a lot of fluctuation when then there's not a lot of steadiness to reach that 2.5% average. Here's our new growth history. Our highest point was $80,750,000 or so. That included a TIF release of property of approximately $40 million. Since then, we dropped down back in 2008 to $40 million. Last year at $23 million, and this year we're projecting $22 million. And here's our tax rate history versus our tax increase history. And you'll notice that high 14.94% increase in 2005 was a result of referendum increase. You'll also notice in 2009 we had this huge drop to 1.42% tax increase. So last year we didn't get a lot of additional funds. This year we're projecting that we would receive approximately 4.17%. And our tax rate would increase to 3.68%. So here's our proposed tax levy. Again, this is the inflated levy. The levy is inflated by approximately 2%. And the total amount that we're projecting to levy is $93,500,991. It translates to a rate of 3.7443. In the Ed Fund, it would be $70,472,000. Operations maintenance, a little less than $9.3 million. Transportation, approximately $1.4 million. IMRF, $1.5 million. Social Security, $1,036,000. Working cash, we're not levying a lot of working cash in hard times. It doesn't really make sense to try to put away too much money in savings, even though it's nice to always put a little bit away. So we're only looking to levy about $22,000 into that. Special ed, which goes into the education fund, $922,064. So our sub is $84,686,924, and debt service will be the same in both the estimated and the proposed tax levy because, again, debt service is not capped, and so we don't need to inflate it. And that amount is $8,814,067. The proposed 2010 tax levy is a percent regular levy increase of 5.69% and dollar increase of $4,556,398. The debt service levy dollar increase is $781,656. So the total levy increase from 2009 would be $5,338,054. Be wonderful we would get that, but that is probably not what we're going to be receiving. Instead, this is what we'll probably be receiving. Our total amount, a grand total, would be $91,844,65. We expect to get about $69 million into the ed fund, $9.1 million to O&M, transportation about $1.368, IMRF again $1.5 million, Social Security $1,016,000, working cash $21,981. Special ed $903,984 for a subtotal of $83,026,397. We estimate that we would receive a regular extension increase of 3.61% or $3,677,527. Again, bond and interest extension increase of $781,656. So the total extension increase from 2008 would be $4,459,184. It is $1,665,26 less than we proposed to levy. So again, here's our proposed versus our estimated. You can take a look at that. And notice the rates per $100 of EAV is $3.74 or so for proposed, that inflated levy. And actually, we believe that our extended amount will be about $3.68 per $100. Please note that our rate is expected to rise because our EAV is falling. In years when the EAV growth exceeds the consumer price index, rates will drop. In years when the CPI is higher than the EAV growth, or in this case, EAV actually drops, the rates will increase. And I will be happy to take any questions.
Mrs. Deroni. Thank you for these charts. They're clear. They're good. Just one question. If you go back to 13, the one just before this.
Yes.
You mean at the bottom, total extension increase from 2009, do you not?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. It's not nice to trick me like that because it's so complicated to understand in the first
Yes.
place.
I absolutely do. Thank you for pointing that out.
How confident are you that levying just 2% higher than the amount that we expect to really get, which I know you're really good at pinpointing, how confident are you that the 2% is enough so that we don't, as we say, leave any money on the table that compounds from year to year and then we really do the district a disservice? Because I know some years it's been as high as 4%. Mm-hmm. What determines that? Is that the new growth factor that we think we might not know about?
I think that's really what it is. We went back and looked at trends, and generally York Township accounts for 70-75% of our new growth. So when you're looking at that, then you can take a look at that $17 million, which we know is a set figure that we've received, and extrapolate that. Around $5 million, a little less than $5 million will be more than enough, and that's what we're estimating at $22 million. So increasing it by 2% in this market, I think, is a fairly solid and safe bet. I'm just hoping that we get what we are estimating. So.
Mrs. Davy.
The only slide that we haven't seen that we sometimes have seen is the enrollment, and we may see that slide more related to budget. But I think it's always worth pointing out that what we're doing, we get no more money, or we are not entitled to levy anymore based on an increase in enrollment in our school district. And isn't it true that our enrollment has continued to increase?
That's absolutely true. The deciding factor in any kind of levy is there's really two. It's the new growth, and that's just new property. So it isn't a matter of property that's exchanging hands, but new buildings, and the CPI. And the CPI has little to nothing to do with employment costs, which is our largest cost, or anything that really affects us. But it is the legislation and what we live with. Our enrollment has increased every single year and continues to increase. And what complicates this even more is almost all of our funding comes after the fact. So the dollars that we're getting for taxes are 2010 tax dollars. The money that we get, if we get it from the state, is already a year behind, or at least several months behind. In the case of the state now, it's years behind. So, and even the federal dollars is after it's spent. So we put the money out, and we have to wait for the money to come back in. And it's a continuous cycle where that gap between the money that you receive and the money that you're actually spending or putting out in order to educate the students that are coming in, that growth enrollment continues. That gap gets longer and longer and larger. So it's a difficult process to try to balance all of that.
I guess I would just add that I'm hopeful that we do continue to see somewhat positive trends in the CPI. As a district, we have felt very clearly the pain of having a 0.1% CPI, particularly when the expense side of our balance sheet is not controlled the same way. So our revenue was dramatically less than our expenditure levels. We've seen the impact on capital expenditures, the types of projects we've delayed, and the way we've tried to manage our resources. So I am hopeful that we are able to access at least what you're estimating on here, and try to rebuild at least some of the cash balances so that we're out of the danger of having to issue tax anticipation warrants, and then further to start to put some money back for some of the delayed capital projects that we haven't been able to deal with. Are there any other board discussion items? Dr. Krizik, Ms. Masterton, thank you for the levy. And next we will have the fiscal year 2010 school report card overview.
Today, it's perfect that we're reviewing the 2009-2010 school report card, because the day started with a visit from Peter Cunningham, the Assistant Secretary for the Office of Communication and Outreach at the Department of Education, who came to Edison School today to congratulate the students, staff, and parents on their Blue Ribbon recognition. He shared with everyone what was on the horizon at the federal level, but he took time to carefully listen to the staff, the students, and the parents. We have some very insightful students in our midst that are from 4th through 8th grade, who he at least offered 1 or 2 jobs this afternoon. So, based on what their thinking was, so we have a lot to be proud of. I think that our students represented individuals that have both a desire and a passion to continue to achieve, but also a significant pressure to continue to achieve. And so on an annual basis, we are required by school code to share with you the results of the annual school report card. Dr. Sullivan had shared with you at a previous meeting the preliminary achievement results, and the recently released school report cards confirm the information that she had provided to you. As you recall, she had said that sometimes a number or two changes between the early release and the final release, and I'm happy to let you know that those were a perfect match. What I'd like to do is just kind of highlight 5 things as part of our school report card review, and that is some of the financial indicators that are included on our school report card, the demographics that apply to both staff and students, instructional information that has changed and evolved over time, just a brief update again on the adequate yearly progress that Dr. Sullivan spent so much time talking on, but without talking about AYP in light of financial and demographics information, it would not be a complete picture for our community. And then I'd just like to end with some overview observations and some trend data that we've seen over the past 4 years. Beginning with financial information, really what this chart is showing you, it's really comparing over 4 years what our expenditure by fund comparison is. So as Ms. Masterton has just talked a little bit about the levy into each of those funds, with the exception of site and construction, because there is no levy for that fund. We look at where we were in 2005 and where we are in 2009 with the education fund. And actually, you can see that only 70% of our expenditures are coming out of the education fund when we look at our total budget, which is a slight drop from 2005, about a 2.2% drop. Operations and maintenance is, again, a slight drop, 1.1% drop. Transportation is pretty much of a wash. It's really kind of in the same ballpark as it was before. We have seen our bond and interest increase from 2005 to 2009, and that is because we embarked on the sale of some capital bonds in order to accomplish some capital development projects in this past year. IMRF Social Security remains rather constant. We have expended all of our life safety dollars, or almost all of those, and so we have not really expended any life safety dollars in this past year. And then site and construction, because we did have capital projects, will show that 9.7%. Going forward, that picture is going to look a little bit different because the site and construction percentage is going to drop down as we have greatly reduced the amount of dollars that we have allocated to site and construction, at least this past year going forward. When we look at the expenditure by fund comparison, not to ourselves over a 4-year trend, but from the district to the state, I think there's some interesting observations to be made. As a district, we spend, or the percentage of expenditure is 70% in the education fund, and at a statewide level, it's 69.6. So those two are really pretty matched statewide. We're very matched also at operations and maintenance, just 0.2% less. Transportation, if you look at that, we are at 2.6% of our expenditures, where the statewide average is 3.8%. And that is because we transport less than 50%, or right around 50% of our students. Bond and interest is very close to what the statewide average is, so you can see that that is a mechanism that school districts across the state are using to infuse new dollars to accomplish some goals they have. Our IMRF Social Security costs are slightly higher than the state average. Life safety, 0%, and again, the statewide average is 0.8. And then if you look at site and construction, again, we are just slightly ahead of the state average. So we're pretty well matched, with the exception of transportation and IMRF Social Security, and then again, site and construction. When we look at just the education fund, and we look at the 4 main areas of where our expenditures fall in that fund, and you compare the district, when we're in blue, to the state, who are in red, you can see that we do spend a significantly higher portion of our dollars on instruction. That instruction includes salaries and supplies and materials, everything related to instruction, so it isn't purely salaries. If you look at our administrative costs compared to the state average, there's a huge discrepancy, and our percent of our budget is 0.8%. compared to the state average of 3.2. So you can see that we are not too heavy administratively with our expenses, and some of that is a reflection of the reductions that we have made over the past year. As it relates to support services, pretty well matched statewide, and then in terms of other expenditures, we're slightly less. Which means that we have, less other, there's no discretionary money, there's no such thing as discretionary money, but we have less other resources available to help us accomplish some of our goals in the education fund. So that's kind of how we match up to the state, particularly just looking at the education fund. This is a pretty telling picture if we look at our revenue by source. And this is why sometimes the levy conversation here in this district can be such a spirited one, is because essentially 85% of our budget is coming from local taxes. And with Ms. Masterton pointing out that housing values have decreased approximately 6.8% in Elmhurst, it still doesn't mean that what's going to mean for the taxpayers is it's going to be perceived as they're paying more for what they have been receiving. So our percent of local taxes is 85% compared to the state average of 58.4. That is a huge difference between us and other member districts around the state. When we look at other local revenue, it's 2.3% difference with us being less. Again, another less source. Again, looking at general state aid again, 2.3% of our budget comes from general state aid. We get about $3.4 million in general state aid, not a significant amount of dollars. We're fortunate that we are not a flat grant district where the state eliminated that flat grant funding this year. But our concern, as was pointed out by Ms. Masterton last year, is it doesn't really matter that we're expected to get $3.4 million or projected. By June 30th, what will be our actual receipts on that? That is a huge concern. Other state revenue, some state grants, again significantly less than some of the state averages. It makes it difficult for us sometimes to be competitive for other state funding sources because we're a relatively high-achieving school district with not high levels of poverty. So it makes it very difficult for us to seek out some of those additional dollars. And then when you look federally, the discrepancy is even more significant, an 8.3% discrepancy between what we get federally and what school districts around the state receive federally as part of their budgets. The issue for us going forward is this is the last year for ARRA dollars, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act dollars, and we are also being forewarned that our Title II dollars, which funds professional development and some class size reduction positions, at least 2 of those, is expected to be reduced. So when we look at this chart next year, you're going to see the percentage of local taxes even higher proportionately based on the distribution of those dollars. So that is the financial. That's kind of the financial overview in terms of where we are compared what our 4-year trends look like internally to us, as well as how we match up to, again, districts around the state. One of the other things that we've looked at from year to year that's reported on the school report card are the staff and instructional demographics. The years of teaching experience, it can be a misleading number because that number can change dramatically from year to year depending on how many retirees that you have and how many new positions you may hire. So our district average of years of experience is 11.4, state average 12.7, districts of average same type 13.1, and of similar size 12.6. So you can say that our years of a teaching experience are just slightly less against those 3 other comparatives. Percentage bachelor's degrees, we're at 41.9 with the range being 40.8 to 45.4. What we have seen over the past several years is an increase in the percentage of our teachers obtaining their master's degrees, and we have 58%. When you compare us to districts of similar size, we're right on target. We're slightly ahead of the state average, and then of districts of the same type, we're also ahead. One of the things that we did in the last contract negotiations to incent more teachers to move from the bachelor's to the master's lane was to remove the bachelor's plus 35 lane.
because we really want teachers to attain that master's degree, that sense of accomplishment, that sense of completion. We think that was important, and so we tried to incent that in the last contract negotiations. When you look at our pupil-teacher ratio, and again, these are district averages, we have the lowest pupil-teacher ratio. That means for every 12.4 students, there is a certified teacher. Doesn't necessarily mean classroom teacher, it's every certified teacher. So that's psychologists, social workers, PE, art, music. That's 12.4. Compared to districts of similar size, it's 14.1. When you extrapolate that out over a population, you can see that the number of staff we have would be proportionately higher than to those comparable districts. But when you look at our pupil admin ratio, you want that number to be higher, not lower, and it is the highest compared to the state average and the average same type, as well as the average same size, which means for every 227.9 kids, there is one designated administrative position. So obviously this report card is showing that you have invested your dollars as close to the classroom as possible based on these ratios here. But then we can break out the teacher ratio for pre-K-8 and 9-12. They do not give a unit district ratio, so I pulled out the pre-K-8. Again, our pre-K-8 ratio is the lowest against all those comparables. And with the exception of average, same type, and state average, which are very similar, our 17.9 at 9-12 is less than the average of similar size of 19.3. Again, you can make the same inference that the lower your class size ratio is, the more certified staff that you have employed. And that will help then explain the percentage of dollars that we are expending in the education fund that addresses instruction. That's where those dollars will be. Moving on to now district student demographics. I know that from previous years I used to only give you the district average and the state average on each of those demographics. And invariably I heard from the table, but that isn't really representative of the diversity in this district. So what I did for you is I showed you the range between schools. So when we look at this, the range between these schools does tell a much better story of the diversity of the district. I want to point out those with the least differences between all of our schools, all 12 of our schools. The percent of attendance, the percent of chronic truancy, and then the percent of Native Americans. There really is no statistical difference between any of those three factors. But where you do see the most significant difference would be in the percentage of low income, which has a range of 1.8 to 36.2. And we know this year already one of our schools is exceeding the 40% mark. So this is last year's data. This is not this year's data. The percentage of our limited English proficient students, again, from 0% to 24.3. Our percentage of white students, 34.8 to 89.4. Percentage of Hispanic range from 2.6 to 39.0, and then our percentage of Asian students from 1.8 to 15.2. So when you look at our district averages, in some ways it might be misleading because those numbers look relatively small. And as Dr. Sullivan had indicated to you in her last report, we have a very small percentage of black students, not enough to be considered a subgroup in any of our schools, but enough to be considered a subgroup within the district. So that I'll show you some changes within that group over the past few years. So moving to that next slide is these are 4 of the key NCLB subgroups as they exist today. And while Mr. Cunningham shared that there is going to be changes to NCLB and changes to AYP, they do not know how they're going to address accountability. And there is a strong push from advocacy groups to not give up on accountability for these subgroups. The fear is if you no longer pay attention to the subgroups, that they will be ignored and the gaps that currently exist will get significantly wider. But I want to point out 2 significant trends in our demographics over the last 4 years. Economically disadvantaged in 2006 was 4.9, and last year it was 10.1. So it's doubled for us. Hispanic has went from 7.2 to 9.4. It has increased by about a third. Those trends mirror what is happening in DuPage County. So Elmhurst is not unique. These are DuPage County trends. And we're going to continue to see those trends because we don't necessarily see any significant economic recovery in the immediate future in the next 2 to 6 years. Some people say maybe up to 10. I'd like to be a little more optimistic and think a solution might be out there. But you can see the limited English proficient population is relatively the same, although a slight dip. As you recall last year when Teresa Ulrich presented the ELL study, she showed you there was a dip. We had exited a significant number of students over a period of time, and now that is beginning to climb. So that 2.8 should not be misleading. We have a significant number of LEP students that require intervention. But you can also see the number of our black students has gone up 0.5%. So those are some of the changes. And again, accounting for the district-wide subgroup of NCLB. One of the things this board has been passionate about is the amount of time allocated, the instructional minutes allocated each day to the core subjects. And what you have in front of you is the chart representing math, science, English language arts, and social studies grades 3, 6, and 8. I'm happy to share with you that over the past 4 years, we have worked to increase the number of instructional minutes we provide to students without changing the length of the instructional day. But in spite of this work, there are 5 areas where we continue to have substantive differences, and that would be math in 6th grade, math in 8th grade, science in 3rd grade, English language arts in 6th grade, and social science in 3rd grade. So of those areas, we've made growth. We're happy to say we've made growth, but not enough growth to exceed those state averages. And our goal has never been to be at the state average. It has always been to be higher than the state average. Here's how we were able to make some of those adjustments without increasing the instructional day. The changes to our elementary Spanish program and the change in the number of minutes to elementary art has allowed for some increase in instructional minutes. 5 minutes a day or 5 minutes over a week means a significant amount of time, as well as does 15 and 20 minutes. The changes at the middle school level that were able for us to capture some additional minutes in some of the content areas at the middle school included moving away from a modified block schedule to decreasing seminar time. Both the combination of those two things has allowed for the increases in instructional minutes. Again, it is at the middle school in math and in language arts that those continue to be below the state averages. So again, it has always been a board goal to increase instructional time in the content areas, and so we have some more work to do here as we move forward. This is really what Dr. Sullivan had shared with you the last time. I just really put it in a different chart. I think the celebratory comment that she made last time is there are 600 hurdles that we must go through to achieve AYP for every subgroup at every school and district-wide, and last year we did not meet 7 of those. So as a district, we did not meet AYP in math because of the black subgroup. So we did not meet that. So as a district, we made it in reading, but we did not make it in math. When we go down to all of our other schools, please remember that we've seen a shift in the number of schools meeting AYP this past year, and I'll summarize that at the end. But when we look at grades 9 through 12 or the 11th grade, all students did not meet AYP in reading. The target was 77.5. We had 73.1. All students did not meet the target in math. Again, the target was 77.5. We had 74.3. And in addition to all students not meeting in reading and math, our Hispanic students and students with IEPs both did not meet AYP in both areas, reading and math. Even though we saw some positive changes with our limited English proficient students, we saw some growth district-wide. It's not necessarily reflected on this chart. So that is where we are, AYP. So I'm just kind of going to give you some high-level overview trends that we have seen with this report card. We continue to have a greater reliance on local funding compared to state averages, and we anticipate this reliance on local funding only to increase. There has been significantly less funding from state and federal sources compared to state averages, and that's for two reasons. Again, being a relatively high-achieving, relatively affluent school district with not significant diversity on a district-wide level, we are not always able to compete for some significant state and federal dollars that are out there. We've seen changes to two significant NCLB groups, and that is economically disadvantaged and Hispanic, with economically disadvantaged almost doubling, and then changes to the Hispanic population. The positive thing is we've seen increases in instructional minutes in several core content areas, but we are still below state averages in some areas and at some grade levels. Pupil-teacher ratios are lower than comparable districts. Again, this means more staff per pupil, and your pupil administrative ratios are higher than comparable districts, meaning this is less administrators per pupil. 11 of our 12 schools made AYP. That was compared to 9 of 12 schools in FY09. That's a positive celebratory moment. But the one thing I really want to point out is that the gap in performance between the middle schools has been significantly reduced over the past several years. But particularly from last year to this year. The gap in reading at the middle schools, and I think it's at 6th grade that I was looking at, was 13.1 in FY09, and it was narrowed to 7.8 in FY10. That's significant growth, and that is what our goal has been, is to have all of the middle schools perform at high levels. And in math, we saw an equally powerful closing of the gap. We had an 8.3% gap between our highest and lowest performing middle school in math, and it was reduced to 5.3. So that certainly represents the successful implementation of new curriculum, the Springboard curriculum in language arts, the new math adoption, as well as teachers' continued work to implement curriculum with integrity, with some slight increases in time in a few places. So that is your 2009-2010 school report card. Are there any questions?
Mrs. Davy.
There's only one comment. It's not a question. Thank you very much for this presentation, Dr. Krizig. The one slide that is unacceptable to me as a board member is the time teaching core subjects, because I appreciate that we're moving in the right direction, but in my mind, not fast enough, and we're intuitively, we're never going to get where we need to go academically with student achievement unless we at least get all areas up to minimum state average. And I think, as you said, state average isn't really even the mark we should be striving for. You've said that this year there have been some changes. Is there going to be a significant shift when we look at this next year based on the changes that we have seen this year, or it's similar?
A few minutes here, a few minutes there. Maybe we've been able to capture, but not significant. Not enough to show any real changes, particularly at the elementary level. Most of the changes had been implemented, before. We don't show second grade up there. That's not shown. In second grade, did we capture more minutes in second grade? The answer is yes, we did. But that won't be reflected on the school report card. So if we had to look at all of our grade levels, I think we can probably show some changes in first and second grade, mostly in second grade this past year. And that came as a result of the change to the elimination of a world language in second grade this upcoming year. Mr. Collins?
This might be an extension of Mrs. Davies' question, but one observation is we do spend less time teaching those subjects than the state average, but we significantly outperform the state average. And what would our approach be to get and I agree, if we spend more time teaching, it seems to be a correlation to increased performance. However, the school day is only so long. So something's got to give, either the enrichment programs that we provide, like foreign language, art, et cetera, or the length of the school day. And what direction are we headed there?
Well, two comments. First of all, we have never compared our performance to the state average. It's not our comparable point. We have identified our benchmark districts that we compare ourselves to, and we have looked at not just the length of the school day, but the length of the school year. And so we do know that we have our benchmark districts that have anywhere from 2 to 5 additional days, instructional days, and we also know that how they utilize time during the day is a little bit different. We use our time differently in grades 3, 4, and 5 because we value world language. So we embed that in our instructional day. We value that at the middle school, where we not only have unified arts and PE like most other schools, but world language is not embedded into the unified arts sequence. It's not an either or, it's a both. And so you know, there's only so many minutes. I think these are conversations that we're having about what makes the most sense, what would help teachers, what would help improve their instruction, and what would help improve student outcomes. Again, the focus is on the learning. And as a result of really great engaged learning and extended time, then we'll see different outcomes. The outcomes are not the driver for us. It is what is getting us to those outcomes has been what our dominant focus has been these past couple of years.
I know we talk about not comparing ourselves to the state, but when you looked at our peer districts, you were obviously able to see we had a shorter amount of instruction time that we were able to afford our students. Does that exist with the state? Is that the primary differential when we are looking at these benchmarks comparisons against the state, that our amount of instruction time, or is it that it's being used differently, or is it difficult to tell from the data you have available?
No, it's not difficult to tell. Once the school report cards are unembargoed at the state level, we'll make our comparisons against some of our unit districts that we compare ourselves to. But technically, those report cards are embargoed until Friday. We will be releasing ours sometime after 10:30, 11 o'clock, midnight tonight. All of the school report cards are going to be posted to each of the schools' website, and the district report card will be posted to the district website. So we're releasing our report card data earlier than what is required. We do want the public to see what our school report cards look like, and because there's really some good information in there, but there are also points of celebration. It is really kind of looking at this somewhat from the lens of the glass half full, not necessarily the lens of the glass half empty. But those will be, for the media, those will be up for you to begin to take a look at. You don't have to wait till the state releases them on Friday.
I guess I just have one final comment. When we looked at your subgroup of demographics, the fact that the economically disadvantaged population has in fact doubled in this period of time, I think is very telling. We've spoken at length about scarce resources and, how we need the tax resources available to us to provide the education we want to provide, but it's clearly an indicator that this is touching a lot of families in our community.
It is.
Are there any other board questions? Thank you very much for this. I appreciate that this was a different view on information. I think it really gave us a little bit more insight into our district than just reading the standard format of the school report card.
I just want to give you a brief update now on the dashboard. We are in the process. Sorry, I need to
If you like to use, do you want to use the?
Fancy.
Use that if you want.
Okay, in case we have had portions of the dashboard updated now with the release of the report card. But it has not gone as far as what our vision is for the use of this dashboard. So I'm just going to kind of open it up really quickly, just point out a few things, not spend very much time on this. What we have asked to have happen is that when we look at state performance, we are not just looking at the high-level picture of where we are as a district compared to the state average, but we wanted it brought down to the school level. So we can then see these graphs from each of the school levels. We think that fits with our goal of being transparent with information and data that we provide to community members and to parents. And I'm going to say some schools have had a tremendous story over the past 4 years. And I think that story represented visually is very, very positive. But as you can see, this represents the overall percentage of District 205 students' test scores as meeting or exceeding. And we've updated it to include the 2010 data. So we have that. We have details that go along with that. And underneath that then is we break out, the third grade ISAT reading and the fourth grade ISAT and the fifth grade ISAT. So this has been updated primarily with the state assessments. So we've done that on the dashboard. We have also updated ACT performance to show that shift of movement from 23.1 to 24.1 for the graduating class of 2010. We have updated our graduation rate for 2010, so you can kind of look at what that trend data was. As we look at academic rigor, that relates to the students that are taking AP exams who are scoring a 3, 4, or 5. This is really good trend data, as you can see from the last 3 years, actually the last 5 years, about where we are. It has further details to allow us to kind of look at the, I'm so sorry. Let me go here. The percentage of students in the graduating class who are taking one or more AP classes. And if you look at the class of 2010, 53% of those students had taken one or more AP course. That's almost double from the class of 2009. So the more that we can incent and encourage kids to take more rigorous coursework, they will be better prepared as they go on to any secondary education, 2-year university, 4-year university, trade school, military, whatever. And then they will no doubt perform higher on some high-stakes assessments like the ACT, which will then make them more competitive for the range of college placement options that they would have available to them. So I just kind of wanted to let you know that we continue to tinker and update this dashboard. It'll undergo some additional transformations, but we were pretty much out on the lead on launching this dashboard last year. And again, it is just one other snapshot, one other tool for the community to kind of get a sense of, where are we as a school district today? Where have we been? And are we showing evidence to our taxpayers of what we have done with their investment of dollars in our schools? So a lot of good information can be gleaned from looking at the dashboard. So just if you want to navigate around, it's been updated and it's going to continue to update. So that's all I wanted to share with you about the dashboard. We haven't forgotten that, and if there's ways that we can continue to improve that, we will do so. Any questions about the dashboard? Thanks. I'm going to now turn it over to Dr. Sullivan, who is going to just talk a little bit about the library grant. Go ahead.
A very little bit about the library grant. This is really a grant requirement for us to submit this grant into the, it actually is the Secretary of State's office for funds. We are required to bring this to the board, get that grant approved, and acknowledge that we have the application and the Linking for Learning booklet that they require on file for review. Just as an aside, we haven't gotten money from last year's grant, so we haven't spent that money. They did extend last year's grant to be a 2-year grant, so the $5,700 We haven't received that from last year. We don't anticipate really seeing this anytime soon, and Ms. Masterton will not let us spend a dime until it shows up.
Are there any board questions on the library grant? Okay, we will continue forward on our agenda. Our next item is approval of board minutes for the September 28th, 2010 and October 12th, 2010 meetings. Are there any amendments or corrections to these meeting minutes as presented? Seeing none, they will be approved as presented. Our next item on our agenda is the superintendent's consent agenda. Are there any items any board members would like removed from the consent agenda for discussion? Seeing none, I will accept a motion. Ms. Hirsch?
I move that the board approve the superintendent's consent agenda, including items A through I, as presented.
Moved by Ms. Hirsch, seconded by Mrs. Conroy. No, there's no financial items. Okay. Mrs. Walsh, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Conroy? Yes. Mrs. Droney?
Yes.
Mrs. Davy? Yes. Mr. Carlquist is absent. Mrs. Ostrich?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Okay, 6 ayes, no nays, 1 absent. Our next item on our agenda is upcoming meetings. We have a meeting scheduled for Tuesday, November 16th, Board of Education business meeting here 7:30 at the District 205 Center, and December 14th is our regular business meeting, again 7:30 here at the district office. Our next item is board communications. I have 2 communications that I would like to share. The first relates to Mr. Carlquist had, I guess, opened the discussion at the last meeting, finalization of the priorities for the school district for 2010-2011. And I'm sorry, I'm losing my technology here. We have a list of 12 priorities developed by the superintendent and school board for the 2010-2011 school year. These represent the priorities of our district resources for the current year. Work has already begun on these areas, and some, in fact, have already been substantially completed, but we thought it important to share these with our community to give visibility to our focus for the 2010-2011 school year. So there are 12 items. The first, relating to curriculum and instruction, is maintaining momentum that we've begun in the area of curriculum and instruction, assessment, and professional learning communities. The second is to continue the implementation of the response to intervention to include the social emotional component. The third, also on curriculum instruction, is to continue to put structures and processes in place to improve student outcomes, with particular emphasis at the high school. Our next item relates to research and analysis. We want to complete the power standards and proficiency scales for literacy and math K through 12 to be completed by June 2011, and develop a plan to make standards for complete standards for the other content area for the following year, a school year on June 2012. Also under research and assessment, we want to implement the Mastery Manager tool as a tool to assist teams in schools with making informed decisions. So that's the tool they'll use for data. And then also under research and assessment, to implement the EPERT process as a strategy to evaluate programs and to allocate resources. Communication, to optimize internal and external communication strategies and structures. Under human resources, we need to put a new administrative evaluation process in place, specifically ValEd. Under human resources and government, we have a new contract to negotiate with the Elmhurst Teachers Union. And under human resources and research and assessment, we have several district vacancies that need to be addressed. And in addition, the director of research and assessment that was removed from the current year budget, but is something that We will have, in the following year, governance and curriculum and assessment is using the EPERT process, the data, to identify an expenditure reduction plan of $3 to $5 million for fiscal year 2012. And our last, under finance intergovernmental, to continue to seek resolution on the York High School storm detention. So those are the priorities and focus. Again, these have been things that have been underway, and work has been done starting last summer. I have one additional communication. It's a statement regarding the employment of the superintendent. Dr. Krizik's current 3-year contract ends on June 30th, 2011. The Board of Education has reached a consensus not to renew the superintendent's contract and will begin a search for Dr. Krizik's successor. Dr. Krizik was hired in 2006 with an expectation that she would look critically at every aspect of the educational program and operations of the district, initiate necessary changes, and assist the board in developing new goals for the district and pathways to achieve these goals. Dr. Krizik has met this expectation through extraordinary hard work and intelligent leadership. The board is now looking for a different set of leadership attributes to take the next steps towards achieving the district goals. Dr. Krizik has committed to advancing the district goals for the remainder of the school year and has the full support of the board in doing so. The board will begin the search process at a special meeting that will be scheduled for November 1st, 2010, with interviews of prominent superintendent search firms. The board expects the process to be completed in the spring of this year with the selection of a new superintendent who would begin on July 1st, 2011. I would ask Dr. Krizik if she would like to make any comments related to this.
To say that I am professionally and personally saddened by the decision of the Board of Education to seek new leadership for this district at a time when we are on course to achieve the vision of becoming one of the best schools in the nation would be an understatement. I was hired to bring about substantive change in an effort to strengthen the quality of the educational programs and improve outcomes for all students. For some, these changes have occurred too fast. For others, this change hasn't been fast enough. In the last 4 years, this staff and my fellow administrators have worked tirelessly to implement initiatives designed to align curriculum, establish best practice instructional strategies, and begin the process of creating professional learning communities. As a result of this focused work, there have been a notable number of indicators to show we are on course. Significant improvements in student achievement, 2 blue ribbon school recognitions, and fiscal solvency in challenging economic times are just a few examples of what has been accomplished as a result of tremendous change combined with the hard work of everyone in this district. I am proud of what we have been able to accomplish together during my time here. As someone who is completely invested in this district, it is my hope that the work that has begun will continue. Without question, this school district is in a very different place than it was when I first arrived. And in spite of all the changes that have been made, there remains little doubt that more hard work still lies ahead. Guided by a strong strategic plan, supported by a community that highly values education, and well served by the efforts of staff that make significant investments in our students, District 205 is moving in the direction this board envisioned 4 years ago. While the number of accomplishments to celebrate and indicators of success far outweigh some of the disappointments, I understand that balance is sometimes a matter of perspective. I want to extend heartfelt thanks to this staff and to this community for all of the public and private support you have given me. The gift of your time and effort have been a source of immeasurable strength and inspiration. As a result, Elmhurst has become more than a place where I came to make a difference. It has become a place I too call home. I'm sorry. It has been an honor and privilege to be part of the school district, and I remain committed to ensuring that we stay on course as the year continues.
Thank you. Mrs. Davy.
Thank you. Mrs. Ostojic, the statement you just read reflects the will of the board. And as we all know, a Board of Education speaks with one voice, and I certainly respect that and honor that. But having said that, I would like to add a personal comment or two. I would like to express my minority position to the non-action of this board to continue and extend Dr. Krizik's contract. When we hired Dr. Krizik over 4 years ago, we had lofty expectations of her, and we asked her to be an agent of change. The changes we asked her to make were critical to the success, sustainability, and vitality of our school district. In order to keep our district moving forward and advancing student achievement, we needed to do several things: to put much-needed systems in place, to implement technology and other upgrades, to bring us up to speed with best practices in various areas of education, and to challenge our staff to reach greater heights with their students. She has done what we ask her to do, and in most cases has far exceeded our requirements and our expectations. Student achievement has shown marked improvements in these 4 years. Our financial house continues to be in order, which few districts can still say. Our curriculum alignment issues are being addressed. Our focus has shifted to professional learning communities. I could go on with other ways that Dr. Krizik has led us to be an outstanding school district, one of which I am also very proud to be a part. For these reasons, I am disappointed with the collective will of our board not to have Dr. Krizik continue as our leader. We ask her to bring change to our district and to challenge us. She has done both. Neither change nor challenge comes easily. Both can be difficult to accept, and with both there is pushback. You may hear words from all 7 of us regarding how we are supportive of her and her initiatives, but the true support from us would only come through a commitment to continue with her leadership, and we as a board are demonstrating that we are not willing to do that. I can only say thank you, Dr. Krizik. Thank you for the commitment you've made to our district, for the countless hours you have invested to help make this a better place. Thank you for always placing student achievement as a top priority. Thank you for positively representing our district to the larger Elmhurst community. Thank you for doing what we ask you to do.
Mrs. Durrani.
I'm also in the minority with this decision for 2 related but different reasons. Both the timing of this decision and the message that it sends. Concerning timing, to announce a superintendent search now and bring in a new superintendent is, in my opinion, definitely not in the best interests of this district. As we've heard, Dr. Krizik was hired to make institutional change, and she is doing what we asked of her. She has focused on creating lasting structures in the areas of assessment, professional development, financial accountability, program review, and organizational health. We are making gains, we've heard, with respect to response to intervention, professional learning communities, and relationships with all of our bargaining units. Dr. Krizik is moving the district forward in a professional, student-centered way. Institutional change takes a long time. By our own admission, we recognize that we are just starting to build the momentum to make these systemic changes happen, and we are just starting to see these practices take root. The change we have seen under the leadership of this administration is exciting and promising and fragile. Now is not the time to change leadership, to change direction, or to slow down. I want to see the gains in student achievement that we have enjoyed sustained, not slowed, and certainly not stopped. There's no guarantee with new leadership that this will happen. With new leadership, we will see at least 2 to 3 years of uncertainty. The stability of our second-tier leadership is not yet established. We have new assistant superintendents, several new principals. A district will not thrive without solid, experienced leadership grounded in the history and the values of our community. This is the wrong time to be making a change. We have so much on our plate. We just talked about all of the goals. We just read them all. We have a few retiring administration members that need to be replaced. How can we attract quality candidates for these positions if they won't know who they're going to be working for? And we're facing a board election next spring with possibly 4 new board members. We're trying to update our entire policy manual. There'll be no one left with knowledge of district history to guide us. The second reason that this decision is not in the best interest of the district has to do with the inconsistent message it sends. The message it sends to our district staff is that the board is not pleased with the direction the district is going. Yet, I am pleased with the direction the district is going. If you like where you're going, you don't change the leadership that got you there. This is the first time in my career on the board that I feel real, sustainable progress is being made. I don't want teachers confused about the direction we're going. I don't want them putting these new practices on hold until they see where the new leadership wants them to go. I'm seeing positive change, and I want to ensure continued positive change. I'm not thinking for a minute that this change is happening in our district has been easy for teachers, administrative staff, or the superintendent. It has been a lot of hard work. I want to commend Dr. Krizik and the entire district for their investment in this work. And I want to be sure district staff know that the board supports this work. Yet a change in leadership, in my mind, sends the exact opposite message. No administration is perfect. My job as a board member is to look at the big picture and make decisions based on what I feel will bring the greater good to the children of Elmhurst. My job as a board member is to evaluate results and not to choose leaders based on a popularity contest. Difficult change often means difficult, unpopular decisions. I have seen results, and I want to sustain them. For these reasons, I must respectfully disagree with the majority of the members of the board on this decision.
Thank you. Any other board communications? Seeing none, I will accept a motion to adjourn. It's moved by Mrs. Conroy. Is there a second? Seconded by Ms. Hirsch. All in favor? Those opposed? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.